Every morning, I found a letter on my desk. It was always there before I came to work. The paper was white, clean, and folded neatly in half. My name was never written on it. There was no envelope. There was no sign of who had left it there. At first, I thought it might be a mistake. Maybe someone had put it on the wrong desk. But when I opened it, I found words that felt like they were written just for me. The sentences were short, but they reached inside me. They touched a part of my mind I did not often show to other people. I read them again and again. They were not about work. They were not about money or news. They were about life, feelings, and hope. One letter said, "Some days are heavy, but you are stronger than the weight." I did not know why, but I felt warm inside after reading it. The letters came every single morning, never late, never missing. Whoever the invisible writer was, they were careful. They wanted to be hidden. And yet, they wanted me to read. This mystery began to grow in my thoughts. I started to wake up wondering what the next letter would say. I began to imagine the invisible writer's life. Were they a man or a woman? Old or young? Did they write the letters at night under a lamp, carefully folding the paper before coming to my office in the dark? Or did they write them quickly in the morning, smiling as they left them for me to find? I tried to picture their face. Sometimes, I imagined kind eyes and a quiet smile. Other times, I imagined someone shy, afraid to speak, using paper instead of a voice. One morning, I decided to come to work early, before the sun rose. I hid in the corner, close to the door. I waited. I listened. No footsteps came. When I finally stood up, I saw the paper was already there. How could that be? I had been watching the whole time. The letter felt almost like magic. My curiosity grew stronger. I wanted to thank the invisible writer. I wanted to ask them why they wrote to me. But I could not. I had no idea where to find them. And yet, the letters kept coming, as if they knew I was waiting. The first few letters were short, but every word seemed important. They were not long stories. They were more like whispers in the air, small but impossible to ignore. One letter said, "Even the smallest candle can fight the darkest night." Another said, "Your footsteps matter, even when you feel lost." I did not tell anyone about them at first. I wanted to keep them secret, as if they were a gift only for me. Sometimes, I put the letters in my pocket and read them again during the day when I felt tired or sad. They always gave me a little more strength. It was strange how the invisible writer seemed to know what I needed to hear. If I had a bad day, the letter the next morning gave me hope. If I felt confused, the letter gave me clarity. It was like someone was watching over me, but not in a scary way, in a kind way. I started to think of them as my secret guardian. I noticed that the invisible writer never asked for anything. They never left a name, a phone number, or any clue to who they were. The letters were not about them. They were about me, my life, and maybe life in general. That made me feel something unusual. In this world, people often speak to be heard, to be seen, to get attention. But this writer spoke only to give, to share comfort, and then disappear. Their invisibility made their words feel even stronger. I began to look at people differently. I wondered if it could be someone I already knew, a coworker, a neighbor, a friend from years ago. Could it be the man at the coffee shop? Could it be the quiet cleaner in the building who never looked up when I passed by? Every face seemed possible. Every stranger might be the one. The more I thought about it, the more I wanted to understand their reason. Why choose me? The letters began to feel like a part of my life. Just as I brushed my teeth in the morning or made my first cup of coffee, I also read my letter. It became a routine, but it was never boring. Each note was different, but all carried the same quiet strength. Some made me smile, like the one that said, "The world is noisy, but your heart knows the right sound." Others made me stop and think, like, do not rush the sunrise. Some things are beautiful because they take time. That day, I slowed my steps. I walked to work instead of taking the bus. I noticed the way the light touched the rooftops. I noticed the sound of birds in the early air. I even greeted a stranger with a smile. The invisible writer was doing something strange to me. Without even meeting me, they were shaping my days. I began to wonder if they wrote to others too. Perhaps there were many letters spread across the city, quietly changing lives. Or maybe I was the only one. This thought made me feel both special and uneasy. Why me? What had I done to deserve such attention? And more than that, what would happen if the letters suddenly stopped? One rainy morning, I came to work with a heavy heart. The night before, I had argued with a close friend. Harsh words were spoken, and I felt guilt pressing on me like a stone. I barely noticed the puddles on the street or the cold drops of rain on my coat. I only felt the weight inside me. When I saw the letter on my desk, I almost didn't open it. But I did. It said, even broken bridges can be rebuilt. Sometimes, the first step is only a word. My eyes filled with tears. It was exactly what I needed to hear. I went to the bathroom and called my friend. My voice shook as I said, "I'm sorry." My friend forgave me. Just like that, the heavy stone in my chest began to lift. The rest of the day, I felt lighter, as if a storm had passed. Did the invisible writer somehow know what had happened in my life? Or was it just a beautiful coincidence? I didn't know. But I understood one thing: sometimes, you don't need to see the face behind kindness to feel its warmth. Some days, I woke up with no energy. The world felt too big, and I felt too small. On those days, the letters became more than paper, they became a lifeline. One note said, "The mountain is not smaller because you rest. Rest, and climb again." Another said, "The sea is big, but every drop matters." I read those words over and over. I kept them in a small wooden box at home. At night, when the house was quiet, I opened the box and touched the folded pages. They were soft from being read so many times. Each one carried a part of the invisible writer's voice, a voice I had never heard, yet somehow knew. It was gentle, but firm, like a friend who believes in you even when you don't believe in yourself. That thought alone was enough to help me rise in the morning and keep moving through the day. These letters were not simply words, they were proof that kindness could travel without a name, without a face, and still reach the heart. I noticed my behavior was changing. I began to be kinder without thinking about it. I smiled at strangers. I thanked people more often. The invisible writer's kindness was like water that overflowed from a glass. It spilled into other parts of my life. One afternoon, I saw a colleague looking tired and sad. I wrote a small note for her, "You are doing better than you think." I left it on her desk without a name. Later, I saw her reading it. She smiled softly, the same way I smiled when I read my morning letters. I understood now, words are like seeds. You plant them in someone's heart, and they grow quietly, sometimes in ways you cannot see. Maybe that was the invisible writer's plan from the beginning, to create a chain of kindness, where one note leads to another, and the circle never ends. The thought made me feel both proud and humbled. Perhaps I was now part of the invisible writer's mission without even asking. But curiosity never slept. I still wanted to know who the invisible writer was. One morning, I arrived at work earlier than ever, before the sky was fully light. I stood outside the office building, watching every person who entered. Nobody carried a letter. Nobody looked suspicious. When I finally went to my desk, the letter was already there. My heart jumped. How could this be? I had been watching the entrance the whole time. I checked the handwriting, neat but simple, not easy to recognize. I looked at the paper, the way it was folded, the ink. No clues. Later that week, I asked a few colleagues casually, have you ever seen anyone at my desk in the mornings? They all said no. I even checked the security cameras once, but my desk was hidden behind a shelf. The mystery stayed alive, and maybe even grew deeper. I began keeping all the letters in a notebook, hoping to find a pattern. Maybe the invisible writer's style would change over time. Maybe they would accidentally give away a detail, a place, a personal habit, something that could help me guess. But every letter stayed clean and focused on its message. There were no extra words, no personal hints. Whoever this was, they were careful. I even thought about leaving a note on my desk that said, "Who are you?" But I was afraid they might stop writing if I tried to break the mystery. So I stayed silent, waiting. And a strange thing happened, the not knowing began to feel almost as important as the letters themselves. Each morning, my heart still beat a little faster before I unfolded the paper. The invisible writer was teaching me patience, and maybe also trust that sometimes, you don't have to see the source of light to feel its warmth. I decided that if I could not find the invisible writer by arriving early, I would try staying late. Maybe they came at night, after everyone had gone home. So, one evening, I stayed behind. I pretended to work, typing slowly while the office emptied. I heard chairs being pushed in, papers being shuffled, the hum of the printer stopping for the night. Soon, it was quiet. I sat at my desk, trying to look busy, but my ears were listening for any sound, footsteps, the creak of a door, the soft slide of paper against wood. Hours passed. The air in the office grew still. I checked my phone. Almost midnight. I wondered if I was wasting my time. Then I heard something, a faint noise from the hallway. My heart raced. I stood up, walking slowly toward the sound. It was only the wind pushing at a loose window frame. Disappointed, I went back to my desk. There was nothing. Finally, I gave up and went home. The next morning, the letter was waiting again, as always. That was when I realized something strange, the invisible writer didn't seem to need time to place the letters. They appeared no matter what I did. It was as if the writer could see my movements, avoiding me perfectly. A part of me began to feel that maybe I wasn't the one searching. Maybe they were the one watching. Over the next few weeks, I paid more attention to the details of the letters. The handwriting was always neat and consistent, like it was written by someone patient and careful. The paper was always the same, smooth, without any brand mark. The ink never smudged, as if it had been written long before it reached my desk. I even sniffed the paper once, feeling a little foolish. It had no strong smell, just the faint scent of paper itself. I kept wondering, were the letters written in this very building, or somewhere far away? I tried tracing the folds of the paper to see if there was a special pattern, something that could be recognized. But they were always folded simply in half. No secret marks, no codes, nothing. I began asking questions in a roundabout way. Has anyone been here before I arrive? Does anyone else get strange notes? Most people just laughed and said no. A few looked curious, but none admitted to knowing anything. One person joked that maybe I had a secret admirer. I smiled, but inside, I wasn't sure if this was about love. The letters were not romantic. They were deeper than that, they were about the soul. The mystery started to take over my thoughts. At work, I found myself staring at the door more than at my computer. At home, I lay in bed imagining the invisible writer's life. Did they have a small apartment filled with books and half-finished cups of tea? Did they carry a notebook everywhere, ready to write whenever they felt inspired? Or were they someone with a busy, loud life, stealing quiet moments to send me these gentle words? I thought about leaving my door unlocked at night and sleeping at my desk, just to catch them. But I also feared what would happen if I did. Part of me didn't want the mystery solved. Without the unknown, maybe the magic would disappear. And yet, the not knowing was also driving me mad. I started dreaming about letters. In the dreams, I would see hands placing the paper down, but I could never see the face. Sometimes, I woke up feeling like I had been close, so close, to the truth, only for it to slip away. Then came the day that changed everything. It was winter, and the sky was a cold gray. I had received bad news. A project I had worked on for months had failed. My manager had been polite but clear, it was my responsibility. I felt crushed. The walk to work felt heavier than usual, as if the air itself was pressing down on me. I didn't want to face anyone. When I reached my desk, the letter was there, folded as always. My hands shook as I opened it. It said, "When the road is broken, it does not end. It bends. And sometimes, the bend leads to a better view." I sat there, staring at those words. My eyes burned. How could the invisible writer know exactly what I needed at that moment? It felt almost impossible. I held the letter close to my chest, breathing slowly, letting the words settle inside me. For the first time, I didn't just feel comfort, I felt a push, as if the letter was telling me to move forward, to not give up. That was the moment I decided I would find the writer, no matter what it took. The letter from that winter morning became my turning point. I read it again and again during the day, each time feeling a little stronger. In the past, I had been content to let the mystery stay unsolved, to simply enjoy the magic. But now, I felt a new urgency. I needed to meet this person. I needed to tell them how much they had done for me. I needed to thank them face to face. I began to plan. I would not just come early or stay late, I would change my entire schedule, watch every hallway, check every corner. I thought about writing my own note, "Please meet me." But I was afraid the writer might see that as breaking the rules of this silent game we were playing. So I decided on a quieter plan. I would be everywhere. I would watch the building at all hours. I would talk to people I had never spoken to before. I would listen more carefully than I ever had in my life. Something inside me had shifted. The invisible writer had been my secret companion for so long, now, I wanted them to become real. The letter from that winter morning became my turning point. I read it again and again during the day, each time feeling a little stronger. In the past, I had been content to let the mystery stay unsolved, to simply enjoy the magic. But now, I felt a new urgency. I needed to meet this person. I needed to tell them how much they had done for me. I needed to thank them face to face. I began to plan. I would not just come early or stay late, I would change my entire schedule, watch every hallway, check every corner. I thought about writing my own note, "Please meet me." But I was afraid the writer might see that as breaking the rules of this silent game we were playing. So I decided on a quieter plan. I would be everywhere. I would watch the building at all hours. I would talk to people I had never spoken to before. I would listen more carefully than I ever had in my life. Something inside me had shifted. The invisible writer had been my secret companion for so long, now, I wanted them to become real. After that day, I began to live two lives. One was my normal life, working at my desk, speaking with colleagues, drinking coffee, answering emails. The other was my secret mission, watching, waiting, and searching for the invisible writer. I learned the patterns of the building. I knew what time the cleaner came to each floor. I knew which doors were usually locked and which were left open. I noticed small details I had ignored before, a shoe print in the dust near the back stairs, a faint smell of fresh ink in the hallway one morning, a door that was always slightly open when I arrived. I even began walking to work from different streets, thinking maybe I would see someone carrying the same kind of folded paper. But nothing connected. The invisible writer seemed to exist only in the moments when the letter appeared on my desk. It was strange, the more I looked for them, the more invisible they became. And yet, the more invisible they became, the more I wanted to find them. Sometimes I asked myself, was this search really about the writer, or was it about me needing to believe that someone could care without being seen? Then, one early morning, I noticed something new. It was a small corner of paper sticking out from under my desk phone. At first, I thought it was just a note from a coworker. But when I pulled it out, I saw the familiar neat handwriting. This letter was different. Instead of being folded in half, it was folded into a small square, almost like a secret message from childhood. It said, "Sometimes, the answer is closer than you think." My breath caught. Was this a hint? Was the invisible writer finally telling me to look nearby? I read the sentence again and again. I checked under my desk, inside drawers, even behind the bookshelf. Nothing. But something felt different about that day. My eyes kept moving to the people around me, the way someone smiled, the way another person avoided my gaze. Could one of them be the invisible writer? The letter felt like the beginning of the end of this long mystery. I knew now, they wanted me to find them. A week later, the weather was cold and sharp. I came to the office earlier than usual, but this time I didn't hide or watch the door. Instead, I sat quietly at my desk, pretending to read something on my computer. I listened. The building was still, except for the faint hum of the heating. Then I heard it, the softest sound of paper sliding across wood. My heart jumped, but I kept my eyes down. Slowly, I looked up. And there they were, a person standing in front of me, holding a small folded paper in one hand. They froze when they saw my eyes on them. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavy, but also full of meaning. Finally, they placed the paper on my desk and said softly, "I guess you caught me." My chest felt warm and tight at the same time. After all these months, the invisible writer was no longer invisible. It was someone I knew, but not well, the quiet cleaner who worked in the building. I had passed them many times, nodding politely, never thinking much beyond that. They told me their name, and I repeated it in my mind, trying to connect it to the months of words they had given me. We moved to the small break room to talk. They explained that they had noticed me looking tired and sad one day months ago. They had written a small note on a piece of scrap paper and left it for me. The next day, they thought of another sentence, and another, until it became a daily habit. "I didn't want you to feel alone," they said. Their eyes were gentle, but there was a depth there, the kind of depth that comes from carrying your own quiet pain. They didn't want thanks. They didn't even want to be known. "The words are not about me," they said. "They are about you." Hearing their story made my chest ache in a good way. All this time, I had been imagining someone far away, someone mysterious and unreachable. But the truth was simpler, and somehow more powerful. The invisible writer had been close all along, walking the same halls, breathing the same air. They told me they never planned for it to last so long. But each morning, they found themselves thinking of something they wanted me to hear, something they wished someone had told them when they were younger. That was why the words felt so personal. They came from real places in their heart, from pain they had turned into kindness. I felt tears in my eyes, but I smiled too. I told them how much the letters had meant to me, how they had changed my days, my choices, even the way I treated other people. For the first time, the invisible writer was visible. And yet, they were still the same person whose words had touched my heart without ever asking for anything in return. We sat in the break room, holding warm cups of tea that neither of us drank. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. It was strange. I had walked past this person dozens of times, maybe hundreds, but I had never really seen them. Now, every detail felt important, the way their hands moved when they spoke, the way their voice carried both shyness and strength. I asked, "Why didn't you just tell me from the start?" They smiled a little and shook their head. "Because it was never about me. People listen differently when they think the words have no owner. They take the message into themselves, without thinking about the person behind it." Their answer stayed with me. Maybe they were right. If I had known from the first day, I might have read the letters with different eyes, thinking about who wrote them, what they wanted, what they meant personally to me. But because they were from nobody, they became something larger. I leaned forward, curious. But weren't you afraid I'd never find you? They shook their head again. I wasn't writing to be found. I was writing because I needed to give something. Words helped me once, a long time ago, when I felt invisible myself. I wanted to pass that feeling forward. I thought about this. I had always imagined the invisible writer as someone mysterious for the sake of mystery. But now I saw it was the opposite, their invisibility was part of the gift. By removing themselves from the picture, they made space for me to focus on the words. Besides, they added softly, sometimes, people are ready for kindness before they're ready for the person giving it. That sentence felt like another letter, delivered straight into my heart. I told them my side of the story. I explained how the letters had become part of my mornings, how they had lifted me on my worst days, and even made me kinder to others. I told them about the day I wrote my own anonymous note for a colleague and how her smile had reminded me of mine when I read their words. The invisible writer listened quietly, their eyes soft and attentive. Then it worked, they said. I laughed. More than worked. You didn't just make my mornings better. You changed the way I live. I realized, as I spoke, that I was feeling something rare, pure gratitude. Not for something expensive or grand, but for a simple, consistent kindness that had slowly, quietly transformed me. Before we left the break room, I asked them one more question: will you keep writing? They hesitated. Do you want me to? I nodded. Yes. But not because I need it to survive anymore. Because I want to see where the words will take me next. They smiled in that quiet way of theirs. Then I will. We made no formal arrangement, no exchange of phone numbers or addresses. It felt better that way. The magic wasn't gone, it had only changed shape. I knew now who they were, but I also knew they would always remain, in some way, the invisible writer. As we stood to leave, they said something I will never forget: the best words are the ones that keep living after you stop reading them. I carried that sentence with me the whole day, feeling it echo inside me. It was true, their letters were no longer just folded papers on my desk. They had become part of my thinking, my choices, my heart. And perhaps one day, even without receiving them, I would still hear that invisible voice in my mind, reminding me to look up, to slow down, to keep going. In the days that followed, I thought often about the invisible writer's way of giving. They didn't want credit. They didn't want applause. They didn't even want to be known. And yet, their kindness had done more for me than many big, loud gestures ever could. I realized something important: not all gifts come wrapped in paper you can see. Some arrive quietly, without fanfare, and still change you forever. The invisible writer had shown me that you don't have to be in the spotlight to make a difference. Sometimes, the most powerful acts are the ones done in secret, when no one is watching. I decided to keep their chain of kindness alive. I began leaving my own anonymous notes for others, on a colleague's desk, in the pocket of a friend's coat, tucked into a library book. Each time, I felt a small spark of joy, imagining someone finding it and feeling the same warmth I had felt. I didn't sign my name. I didn't tell anyone it was me. And I discovered something beautiful: giving without being known feels different. It's lighter, freer, and maybe even more real. Over time, I noticed something curious. A few weeks after I started my own notes, I found a message on my desk that I hadn't written, and I knew it wasn't from the original invisible writer. It was from someone else. The word said, "One kind act plants a seed. You may not see the tree, but someone will rest in its shade." I realized then that the invisible circle was growing. The kindness was moving from one person to another, without names or faces, like a quiet river flowing through the city. The invisible writer had started it, but it no longer belonged to just them, or to me. Now, I keep all the letters, theirs and mine, in a box at home. Sometimes I take them out and read them slowly, letting each sentence breathe. I imagine the invisible writer's hand holding the pen, their quiet thoughts shaping the words. I think about the first day I found a letter and how I never guessed it would lead me here. Words, I've learned, are small things, but they can carry great weight. They can lift you when you are low, guide you when you are lost, and remind you that you are never truly alone. You may never see the face behind the words. You may never know the name, the voice, or the life of the person who writes them. But that doesn't make them less real. The invisible writer taught me that some connections go beyond what we can see. They live in the space between the heart and the page. And maybe, just maybe, you can be someone's invisible writer too. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment, or for someone to notice. You only need to begin. Write the words. Leave them behind. Let them find their way. Somewhere, someone is waiting for a message they don't even know they need.